Hodge had worked for Reuters since 1993. Only last Saturday, one of his photos landed on the cover of the New York Times. But if it hadn't been for the blogging community, Hodge's faked photos may never have been exposed.
It's a sort of a taking back the reins of information, I guess you might say, from the mainstream media, and just double checking. And I think people are getting a lot more active about investigating these things.
Charles Johnson of LittleGreenFootballs.com was the first blog to report on the photos. He says countless high-tech detectives are now involved in what he calls a blog swarm.
How many photos have gotten out there that were not quite as crudely manipulated? So I think that question needs to be asked, and I can tell you right now that there's a lot of people scrutinizing photos from Lebanon for more manipulation.
So Howie, we know that the public has precious little confidence in what they read in the newspapers and see on television. What does it say that this mistake was actually not mistake, because obviously everybody's assuming it was purposeful, was caught out there in webland by a blogger?
It shows you there are now millions of people out there with different kinds of expertise who can fact-check the mainstream media, and this was a classic example by this website, Little Green Footballs. And I want to make sure we don't understate this. I mean, this picture is a lie. It's a fraud. It's a journalistic felony, as if you had handed in a story with facts that were made up. And other photographers have gotten into trouble. Some have lost their jobs over this kind of digital enhancement. I mean, this goes back to a decade ago when Time magazine apologized for darkening O.J. Simpson's face in an infamous cover shot. Technology makes it easy to do, and unfortunately that makes it all too easy for some journalists or photojournalists to succumb to the temptation of trying to improve these images.
So what is it consumers are supposed to do about that, Howie?
Well, you know, it's not easy. If I had looked at it not knowing there was anything wrong with it, I probably would have thought it was a perfectly legitimate photo. The original photo, unretouched, was dramatic enough. Why did the guy need to do this? But I do think it shows that editors and supervisors and producers have to be more vigilant, because if they don't, they're going to get spanked by people like this, these guys out on the web who are taking a magnifying glass to everything that we do.
Well, on the Hezbollah side, it's really interesting. I was in Beirut, and you know, they took me on this sort of guided tour of the Hezbollah-controlled territories in southern Lebanon that were heavily bombed. They're much cruder. Obviously, they don't have the experience in this kind of thing, but they clearly want the story of civilian casualties out. That is their what they are heavily pushing, to the point where on this tour I was on, they were just making stuff up. They had 6 ambulances lined up in a row and said, okay, you know, they brought reporters there. They said you can talk to the ambulance drivers, and then one by one they told the ambulances to turn on their sirens and to zoom off. And people taking that picture, you know, would be reporting, I guess, the idea that, you know, these ambulances were zooming off to treat civilian casualties, when in fact these ambulances were literally going back and forth down the street just for people to take pictures.